Hello.
Hi there. Sorry about that.
No worries. Elliot?
Yep,
Great. Sounds like you can hear me okay and I can hear you okay.
perfectly.
Welcome. First of all, I'll begin by saying thank you for joining us this evening and thank you for your interest in being a member on the board. We're very grateful that you would consider this position, knowing that it is uh, pretty much a voluntary position with minimal compensation for your time. And so we're grateful for your willingness to be a servant to your community. So thank you on behalf of the board. Um, we have a number of questions for you this evening. You're aware of them. I believe you have a copy of them. As each of the board members asks you their question, they'll introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about themselves. But because we only have 30 minutes, we'll probably just jump right into it if you don't mind.
Yep, that's fine. I've actually reviewed all of your bios already, and then some of your names I'm already familiar with from my time at the Portland Water Bureau. So feel free to expedite that as much as we can.
Marvelous. Great. Thank you. And also, there'll be time at the end for you to ask any questions that you may have. All right. Thank you. We'll begin with Commissioner Doan.
Well, I spent 26 years with the Portland Water Bureau. So, but I will say this, that I am hard of hearing and I'm dependent upon captioning. So if you say something and you get a blank stare from me, it's because the captionings are lagging 4 or 5 seconds. Sometimes, however, I can read lips and it works out pretty well. Um, anyway, okay. Let's see, I should give you a little background. I've been on the board since 1998. Uh, and that's really about it. I'm running for reelection in the spring. And then that'll probably be the end of it, since when this term is up, I'll be 80 years old. And I think that's enough. Uh, so anyway, let me ask my question then. What skills, connections, resources, and expertise do you have to offer TVWD as a board member?
Uh, Thank you, first and foremost, commissioners.
But you've already had the questions. I could just say
I,
number
yeah,
one, and you could tell me.
yep, yeah, exactly. So thank you again for your time and consideration today. I appreciate that. Sorry for the technical issues. I have an extensive background in financial planning, both corporate financial planning as well as utility-specific financial planning and rate making. So I started my professional career at Deloitte in audit services. I then spent about 5 years at Nike doing corporate financial planning, and then had spent the last 7+ years at the Portland Water Bureau. I left there in May of this past year to be a primary caregiver for our 3 children. And during that time at the Water Bureau, I was responsible for managing the team, the financial planning team that handles the rate forecasting as well as the budgeting. I was involved in every bond sale, both new money and refunding, that occurred in the 7.5 years that I was there. I started out responsible for the annual rate setting process, uh, trained other staff up on that process, and then, like I had mentioned, was managing the team responsible for that before I had left. Uh, I also attended AWWA seminars around rate making, rate setting methodologies, cost of service principles, and then probably the most relevant experience there, beyond the professional connections that exist, is more project work that I participated in outside of the scope of my direct responsibilities. So that involved expanding the low income and financial assistance program. I partnered with key Bureau staff. That was back in 2017 into 2018. That involved the so they had a well-established fixed discount based on income qualifications. We expanded it to add a second tier discount for extremely low income customers. We also worked through the policy implications and legal considerations that went into developing a multifamily discount, which is pretty novel as far as the water industry goes. It actually works like a voucher that allows the Water Bureau to give water ratepayer funds to folks that we don't have a direct customer relationship with. So the big challenge for the city of Portland is that most of the population that would qualify is in multifamily housing, which usually only has a single meter, a master meter. So a pretty novel approach to a complex problem. But then the biggest concern, I think you're all aware of the filtration project and the costs that that's driving, not just for wholesale customers like TVWD, but also retail customers and the rate pressure that that puts into the future. So I spent the last couple of years really focusing on affordability considerations, how you balance those concerns with CIP, both regulatory CIP like the filtration project and non-regulatory CIP like addressing mains, the 2,200 miles of main that as soon as it goes in the ground, it starts degrading. So it's definitely a unique perspective that I have as far as not just that rate making and really solid financial background, but also some of the broader policy concerns and the trade-offs associated with that. And I had honestly thought it would be a few years before I would even be dipping my toes into something like this, so giving back to my community this way. But the email that went out, and then a couple of folks that kind of poked me a little bit and said, "Hey, this is something that, based on the commissioner that's going to be leaving, there's a very specific skill set that is sort of leaving that board as well." So learn about it, take that into consideration, and here I am today.
Well, you answered my question. You answered my question. I've got a zillion more, but we should probably do those offline. We're going on alphabetical order. So Jim Duggan is next alphabetically.
Thank you. I've been a board member for now over 29 years. And I just fully retired from the city of Beaverton as a civil engineer, and I worked for them 37 plus years. So since you already read the bio and the questions, I'll get right to the heart of the matter. My question is, the board desires a selected board member, the one who will be chosen from this process, that they will run in the upcoming May 2023 special election for a 2-year term. Do you intend to do so?
Probably the easiest question to answer out of the 8. So yes, I would absolutely plan on running in the 2023 special election.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Carl. I'm one of the other commissioners, and I've been tasked with, since you have read the bios, as a board member, what would you do if you directly observed or learned of a district employee appearing unprofessional or representing the district poorly? For example, misconduct, taking to personal errands during the workday, stuff of that nature.
So based on my personal judgment and the perceived severity of that behavior, I would most likely bring it to the attention of the CEO in writing. So based on my review of the policy documents, the board is not at all responsible for management of district employees. So that seems like the most appropriate action to me.
Turn it over to Todd Sanders.
Great. Thank you, Carl. I don't know how to spell, so the other board members are assisting me in keeping things alphabetical. Um, so my question to you, sir, is can you describe your experience in meeting the needs of people with low incomes? And I know you started to address this already in the first question. How would your experience impact your votes for policy setting for the district specific to water rates to preserve the district's infrastructure and to prepare us to future water needs?
Yeah, and this is a very, very tough nut to crack. So I will be as concise as I can, but I think that we're all aware we could spend the entirety of this interview just talking about affordability and affordability concerns and addressing the needs of low-income customers. So I spoke a little bit about that low income discount, or excuse me, the the bill discount low income expansion that I worked on. That's too in the weeds for this. I would say that uh, I absolutely can acknowledge that there are broader affordability concerns based on the projected rate increases that TVWD has published, which are necessary in order to fund the large infrastructure that's being invested in the near term, and then obviously the debt service associated with that into the future. That being said, um, I I wouldn't say that I would always be in favor of some type of general low income policy. It's more about being prescriptive, doing very good analysis on the part of staff, and then asking questions about the completeness or after receiving feedback from the community, whether it would be directly from customers or organizations that are community partners, um, then taking those into consideration before any, uh, I wouldn't say rash action, but before taking policy action that obviously impacts revenues into TVWD, because it's, as I'm sure you're all aware, the the costs for operating and managing and investing in the system are fixed. So anytime that you're providing a discount to a customer, that discount has to be offset by an increase to another customer base. So being able to do that in as transparent a way as possible, so that's the community engagement piece, is very critical, but really striking an appropriate balance between uh, what those discounts result in, the customer base that it impacts, and then uh, the customers that are going to be adversely impacted by that, and ensuring that does make sense and the policy that we're putting in place gets to the intended results or consequences that we would want.
Excellent. Thank you. Commissioner Doan?
Yes. Okay. Individual commissioners do not represent the district's position publicly, i.e. with customers, public entities, businesses, the media, etc. How do you plan to avoid misrepresenting the district's position by distinguishing your personal views from the district's?
Well, a big help is that I do not actively participate in any social media, so there's there's no risk of some part of any public commentary that I would have being misconstrued as representative of the district. Um, in the event that I would be contacted because of the position, because of being a commissioner, I would then refer, whether it's a reporter, a community member, whomever, I would refer them to the district's public communications group or a communications contact. I had that happen just a couple of times when I was at the Water Bureau, but most of the time it was somebody in engineering getting contacted about a finance question, and we would always always trying to route through communications. Nobody wants, yeah, nobody wants to sort of get outside their lane on that.
Okay. next question, I believe, is mine. The Board of Directors is a governing body responsible for setting policy for the district, and the Chief Executive Officer, or CEO, leads operations and manages the district's employees on a day-to-day basis. The CEO reports to the board, and district employees report to the CEO. How do you plan to work effectively in this environment?
While my professional background is more on the operations and management side, I do have plenty of experience focused on that policy side. I sort of mentioned a few of the projects. So that low income expansion was very much a policy focused exercise that we were driving on behalf of the commissioner's office that we were assigned to at that time. There are more technical policies that can be a bit ambiguous, like the revision of financial planning standards. You usually lean on the technical expertise of the finance group to provide recommendations to the commissioners that we would then make on their behalf. That's where, in the event of those more technical financial or rate matters, I feel like I would provide a lot of benefit to the district. Um, and then I've also worked on broader policy focused work like Title 21, which is the dictating city code for the Water Bureau. I was a key member of a team that led a comprehensive review and revision of Title 21. So I was representing, I was the key stakeholder representing all of the finance and accounting team for the Water Bureau. You obviously have a lot of crossover in a document that broad, so it was a wonderful exercise in working with folks at the Bureau with different technical expertise, as well as trying to simplify a very technical sort of Frankenstein's monster that had changed over the years, with the goal of really simplifying the language to make it more digestible to the public. I think that's always a challenge for not just water districts, but it's always a challenge anytime that you're trying to communicate something that's complicated and technical to the public in a way that gives them full faith and confidence in what you're doing.
Thank you.
Back to me. So board members spend time attending various meetings, like board meetings, committee meetings, conferences. Each month, the board meets for 1 2-hour board meeting, 1 2-hour work session, and can be up to 6 hours in various committee meetings. Board members typically attend the American Water Works Association, regional and national conferences, and the Special Districts Association of Oregon Conference. Expenses for these conferences are covered by the district. Are you able to devote sufficient time to prepare for and attend these meetings and conferences?
So I have no problem meeting the time requirements or the preparation for attendance of all board meetings and the committee meetings that you described. Understanding, of course, that you're also talking about things that are averages. There's going to be times that a board meeting goes longer than 2 hours. There's going to be timelines or deadlines associated with certain committee work that could also extend the time there. So I'm very flexible in my accommodations for that. The only exception would just be out of town travel for conferences because of my situation being a primary caregiver for my 3 children. So it's 3 kids under 3. Yeah, yeah, that was my reaction too, Todd, when we found out we were having twins. So that's pretty good. Um, uh, it would make 2023 probably very difficult for me to do any multi-day travel that's not proximal to the Portland metro area. By the time that so the twins are 8 months, they're 8 months today. By the time that they're a year or a year and a half, it very well could be more flexible. I'm just trying to give myself a realistic cushion and not have my wife very, very angry about this this essentially volunteer work.
having
For
been,
what it's worth department, I'm the father of twins too, but they're in their mid 40s. It gets better.
Is that not just the refrain? Yeah. Sometimes you have to remind yourself hour by hour, it will get better. Just get to dinner time, get to nap time.
well, you certainly have all of our empathy. Parenting is a challenge, but a worthwhile challenge.
Absolutely.
All right,
Absolutely.
last question, so we have time for you to ask any as well. Board members work with a variety of people, including fellow board members, TVWD employees, the public, and customers. Conflict can and does occur. Can you share an example of a time you successfully navigated conflict with another person? And using your 8-month-old who refuses to take a nap, I'm afraid won't count. But that one we completely understand.
Yeah. That while that is the most recent
Mhm.
conflict management, that is absolutely not the most appropriate for this circumstance. So I'm pretty thankful in that there have been very few instances in my personal or professional life where really deliberate effort was required to overcome conflict with another person. My uh, justification would be that most conflict, in my experience, arises out of miscommunication or poor communication. So my presumption is to never assume ill intent, to better understand the position that the other party is coming from, uh, then work towards ensuring that I understand what their concerns or even anger might be, repeating and restating those to make sure there isn't any confusion, and then seeking compromise. Um, I think the hard part is you have to acknowledge that you can't always arrive at a position where all parties are going to be happy. So I um, I had instances during the pandemic of resolving conflict between staff that I was managing. That was definitely more difficult than direct management, or not direct management, than resolution of conflict with a person direct with me. So thankfully, that wouldn't really come up here. Um, as far as one concrete example, a professional peer, this would have been about 5 years ago, was in need of some critical information. My boss's boss at the time was instructed that it couldn't be disseminated outside of not just the bureau, but our two specific work groups. So I ended up having to be on the receiving end of their frustration and anger. And in that instance, the best conflict resolution was actually just to be the punching bag. So to own it, to address what the circumstance was, and then after the fact, when the information could be made public, apologize to them and explain the kind of the rock and hard place that I was stuck between. So I think the key is really always trying to maintain, never have a single instance where that relationship is going to be compromised, where it won't be salvageable or usable in the future.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm sorry that I, again, the link issue that I was having. I don't have any specific questions for you. I had the opportunity to read through your most recent financial plan, as well as the budget summary. Um, because of the relationship between the city of Portland, the Water Bureau, and TVWD, it's a lot of information that I was already privy to, but really do appreciate the level of detail that your staff put into that. There's definitely some nuts and bolts that I wasn't aware of, just because I hadn't gotten down into the weeds on that in my previous role. But that addressed all of the intricacies sort of I have about what's on the immediate horizon for the next you know 2 years for the financial plan, but really talking about the forecast through the completion of the Willamette River intake and supply.
Marvelous. Yeah, we're very fortunate to have the financial group that we have. Besides being just very astute individuals and skilled finance and accounting people, they are winners year after year of the Government Accounting Award, and I think you can probably, as you're just saying, see why. They do marvelous work. Matter of fact, the entire water district is made up of amazing people in all the departments of the organization. Just to give you some information of where we are, we were absolutely astounded at the number of people who reached out to apply for this position. We're very, again, thankful to you. But we have to complete a number of additional interviews tonight. We've had some already. And we were just talking at the start of this meeting about our next step. I don't know if we're going to make a decision tonight. We're going to make a decision about making a decision tonight. Our initial goal was to perhaps have someone um, announced by our September 15th meeting. We may or may not make that based on our discussion at the end of today. We will certainly have someone, in place by our October 15th meeting. So that'll give you, as far as we can tell you right now, that's our best guess at where things are. If you do come up with any questions, Elliot, please feel free to contact Debbie. She can pass them on to us or whoever will be the best person to answer them. But again, I want to say thank you personally and on behalf of the board for your interest in serving on the board. We're very grateful for your offer of community service. As you can tell from the history of Commissioner Doan, who's by far the most humble man you've ever met. Oh yeah, I only ran the water district for 20 some years. No big deal. And Commissioner Duggan, oh yeah, just kind of doing this thing with Beaverton for 30 some years. You can see that they're very passionate about community service and about the water district. And as the water district in our next couple years is going to be a different animal than it's been in the past. So, their leadership over the last 20 plus years and their leadership with the rest of the time that they're with us is really important. And bringing someone in who can work with the rest of the board is really important to us.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again for your consideration. Apologies that that you guys are bumping a little bit. I do also want to acknowledge just the breadth of experience. It's incredible to have dedicated as much time to even when you're getting paid for it professionally. It's a bit of a thankless industry. Nobody really appreciates the commodity until it isn't available, and you can never make a life-giving commodity unavailable. So I'm grateful for the work that you guys have done and the combined decades of experience. And like I had said, eventually this was on my radar. It just caught me a little off guard that it would be coming up sort of at this point in my life. But I'm happy to lend that very unique expertise that I have in helping the district move forward, not just in the near term, but over the long term as well.
Well, thank you very much. Good luck with the children this evening, the next couple hours. And we'll be in touch.
Yeah, thank you very much.
All right.
And best of luck with the remaining interviews.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right. All right, so we have about 10 minutes before our next applicant, correct? At 6 o'clock. If anybody needs to, bio break. Does anybody have any thoughts, comments they want to share, or just go off and eat your cookie? Which I already ate my cookie, I will admit. I ate my cookie at like 4:55.
I just want to say just briefly in regard to Elliot, that when I was looking at the board applications originally, the thought did run through my head as I was reading his background that his skill set would be a great replacement for what we lost with Commissioner Bagnall.
Yeah.
But other than that, I'll reserve the rest of my comments, other than I thought it was interesting that he had come to that conclusion already himself. So that was unusual, and I thought I'd share that.
My feeling was that he brings an incredible skill set, one that we're missing, especially the low income rate issues dealing with people behind the master meter. I would look forward to discussing it with him one way or the other.
Yeah.
Because I am clueless as to how to do this.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's say we've had really good applicants all the way along so far. It's not been easy to say this individual just clearly stands out from everybody else. We're very fortunate. Very fortunate. Okay. So we got about
If I could, I'd just like to acknowledge Andrea. She's the one that really worked her tail off to get this pool of candidates. And I just want to acknowledge the work that she did to do that. So, because this has been an amazing pool so far.
all right. Hello, Mr. McCullough.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Hello. Okay, I can take it you can hear me okay because you acknowledged me. Fantastic. And I can hear you just fine.
Perfect.
Great. Thank you. Oh, first of all, I'd like to, on behalf of the board, express my gratitude for you being here with us this evening and your interest in joining the board. As you know, it's not a highly compensated or almost not compensated position. It's a position of public service, and your willingness to consider it, we're very, we acknowledge that, and we're very grateful for that. So thank you. Thank you for your time. For the sake of time, because we have a number of questions today, what we're going to do is go alphabetically through each of the board members. They will ask you questions, and then we will have some time at the end of our discussion for you to ask any questions that you have of us, if that's okay.
Perfectly fine with me.
Great, thank you. In that case, then, we're going to begin with Commissioner Doan and have him ask you the first question and give you a little detail about himself.
Okay, in case you haven't figured this out, we're going in alphabetical order. And
Okay.
I'm Jim Doan, and I've been on the water board since 1998. Prior to that, I was chief engineer of the Portland Water Bureau. I retired in 2001 and have enjoyed working with the water district ever since. I am hard of hearing, so I'm dependent upon captioning. So if you ask a question and it takes me 4 or 5 seconds to answer you, it's because the captions lag, and they're not instantaneous. I intend to run for re-election in the spring, and that's it. Because at the end of this term, I'll be 80 years old, and I think that's enough. Okay. Let me ask the questions. What skill, connections, resources, and expertise do you have to offer for TVWD as a board member?
So yeah, that's a long question. So I'm pretty meticulous with my answers. I'll first start off with my work history, then go into my resource connections, and then sum up with my skills for that question. So I started off my public service in the parking enforcement for the city of Spokane, Washington. I originally started off as a temporary employee and then went to a contract employee. My job there, it was you can imagine parking enforcement. So you're working with enforcing parking, having the having to unload the meters, change, count the change. And then the one thing though that was really interesting is we actually were under the water department, which is ironic now that I'm applying for a water board job. And then we ended up going to the community services, which made more sense. So in that time, the one thing that I really learned about being in public service was that how just that parking had its own effects when done properly and improperly on the city as a whole, and it had its own infrastructure, it had its own thing that needed to be maintained. So that was something that really was interesting in the laws and stuff that govern it and what you can and can't do. um, and then on top of my daily tasks there, I worked with multiple city council members there. I worked with multiple different departments and businesses enforcing and then doing permits and a lot of other things. I ended my career there, well, my job there as a district manager for different one of the districts in Spokane. And then after working that for a couple of years, I was lucky to be moved over here to Oregon, which I always wanted to move to, and for the city of Forest Grove. If you guys know where it's in Washington County here. So under the police department. So I was hired by the chief of police at the time, and as a code enforcement officer. So kind of how it went with if parking enforcement was the minor leagues, the major leagues was code enforcement. So made it to the major leagues as far as administrative enforcement went. The one big hurdle that I thought was fascinating about dealing with codes is just how massive codes are, like to deal with, in the fact that I had to understand federal, state, and local laws in many different avenues. So having to be able to do the research in that was really something that, like, it was a lot, especially when I was the substance matter expert for the city. I had to sit on multiple meetings with multiple different people, especially the city manager, the chief of police, asking me like, "Hey, what's your input? What do you think? You're the expert." And so, never working code enforcement, more parking enforcement, which dealt with codes because parking was an aspect of it. So I was comfortable with that, but having to learn all these other codes, it really, I had a lot of pressure learning these codes. And then obviously the research and the investigation for certain cases was a lot more intensive than parking enforcement. So I had to do a lot of research and a lot of digging up paper trails, looking up shell companies that own properties, and being able to really do my research on being able to figure out where certain people were that I had to hold them accountable and bring them to court for certain things. The big thing though that I learned about that job was probably is working with the public is that education was key. That I realized that enforcement was more of a last case scenario. That working with the public, that more people found it more helpful, and it was more, you had a better chance of them not reoffending if you really supplied them with the knowledge to correct the situation and give them the keys to success. So I really learned working with the public that it was definitely key to be able to inform them what codes they can, what codes that what's right with the codes and what's not right with the codes. In addition to being the code enforcement officer, I was also on the safety committee, the parking advisory committee, the equity board, and I was the CPR, AED, and Narcan instructor. So I had a lot of hats when I was working in Forest Grove. So you can see I'm quite well versed in a lot of things. Uh, then about 2 years ago, I saw an opening for Beaverton as a community service officer. That was I discussed with the chief of police. I believe he's still the chief of police over in Forest Grove, and he even agreed it was the right move for me to make career-wise, which landed me right now in my current position as a community service officer for the city of Beaverton. I can say first off, I love my job. This is where I plan to stay until my career is done. I have every intention to stay living in Washington County, where I bought my house about 9 months ago. But my job is really unique in that there's only five of us, and we're the only five that do our sort of position in the whole state of Oregon. So we fall in between a correction officer and a police officer. So I'm a fully sworn officer that has some arrest authorities, and I would be an armed officer. So I had to get that aspect because it was never like that before. And my main priority is working with the courts, the criminal justice aspect of Beaverton. So that's transporting That's maybe transporting them from if they got sentenced, or transporting them from the jail to court to be sentenced or for trial, as well as do the parking enforcement, and then help out with patrol on different situations. One aspect of this job is that I am a first responder, so I have had to be in tense situations where I'm responding to people that are having heart attacks. I am responding to injury, car crashes. Knock on wood, if there were to ever be some incidents like a school shooting, if I was the closest officer, I would have to respond to that. But with that being said, I can handle high stress situations, and I've been shown to rise to the occasion. As of right now, I got an award ceremony I have to go to next week for saving someone's life that was trying to take theirs at the Washington County Jail, and with our intervention, we're able to circumvent that not happening. But in addition to that, I'm also on the safety committee, and also train all the officers on CPR again, AED, Narcan. So I kind of kept that hat from Forest Grove and applied it to here. The one big thing that's different from the other two jobs is I still work with a lot of different agencies. So I work with the city departments as a whole, but I also work with Washington County.
Did we freeze here for a second? Okay. Hopefully he's just frozen for a sec. We didn't lose him. Alrighty. He's right back. You want to let him in, Debbie? There we go.
No, I'm so sorry that my computer must have disconnected.
Technology gremlins. We're just fine with that.
Okay, perfect. You guys can hear me fine, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, I apologize for that. So, but I was saying with the different departments I work for. So I do work with Washington County. I love working with Washington County, ODOT. Sometimes we work with or the Oregon State Police, Clackamas County, and Multnomah County with transports, as well as Coffee Creek, which is a penitentiary. So I work with a lot of different agencies across the board in a lot of different jurisdictions. And yeah, like I said, I sit on the safety committee, and then CPR. And the last thing I do that was an extra is I run the neighborhood association meeting for the Highland District as the police liaison. I have a meeting next Thursday. I meet with them second Thursday of every month to kind of get closer community ties with the police by offering them stats, and then anything that they have questions on to kind of get to the bottom of it and answer them. So that's a brief overview of my work history in the public sector. Based on my time, I mean, it's not significantly as long as some of you that sit on this board, but the big thing is I have a lot of resources, and I left on a good standing with all of my previous employers with different cities, and they've reached out to me for help for different things, different policy changes, and I'm sure I can reach out to them for any sort of thing that they have as far as both in Oregon and in Washington. Being part of the Code Enforcement Association, I can reach and talk to any code officer who then can talk to any water department. I can talk with the city of Spokane, the water district. The union president was actually the parking union president. So I can fully reach out to him if you had any questions that would be pertaining to maybe how is a city like Spokane dealing with their water, and how we maybe could implement different policies or infrastructure to better suit the Tualatin Valley. I can offer those resources because I've made those connections over the years, and I've made sure to keep a good line of communication between them. As far as my skills that kind of lie both in work and kind of outside of work is I feel like I have outstanding interpersonal communication skills. Parking enforcement, I've dealt with some of the most angry people in the world that you could ever imagine. With that, I've gotten very good at the conflict resolution between people. If someone's really high and elevated, I'm usually that guy that can talk them down. They're maybe up here, and I can bring them down to here, and then we can have a conversation. I feel like I have quite well public speaking skills. I mean, I just got done this year training over 100 officers, and I had to talk for 2 hours a piece, and there was like 30 classes. So 2 hours a piece, 30 classes for a month straight. So I feel comfortable speaking in front of an audience. I'm not nervous. Also, my research skills and investigation skills from being in the code enforcement for looking up legal jargon, legal codes, anything administrative wise, I can really, I've had to work with them and I'm very comfortable working with them now. So I can definitely, if you're looking at a new legislation that's passed that could be affecting the water district and you're on the fence about it, I'm usually able to both track down somebody that could know what they're talking about by making some phone calls, or I could really kind of interpret it in the fact that I've had to interpret so many different codes and policies and Oregon administrative codes that I feel comfortable kind of giving my, educated professional opinion. And another thing is I really understand that a public body such as like the Tualatin Valley District is part of an ecosystem. It definitely that the smallest tweak that maybe can really affect a lot of different departments. And me being conscious of that as a skill comes from time where if you're looking to dig up a water main that might be that maybe in May, but I would be thinking maybe you should communicate with the transportation department to see if they have any construction because it could impact the whole neighborhood as a whole because you could dig up the whole entire streets around the whole neighborhood. So me being cognizant of that, there's a lot of different moving parts in a county in a city that you need to make sure you're cognizant of every one of those before making certain decisions. And then finally, last off is I'm really fiscally conscious of what the budget's like. I know that being a city or being a county, we want the newest, nicest toy, but there's a trade-off, and it might end up being to the taxpayer. So maybe we have to not have the newest, greatest thing where we can turn our water on with our iPhones, but people are paying $1,000 a month for water. I mean, it'd be nice, but maybe we just have to have the normal tap. But I understand that it's sometimes it's better to maintain the current infrastructure than really have to update it with the latest greatest thing because it's not necessary and there's not and the efficiency for cost just isn't there. So I'm really cognizant of that. And that about sums up the first question. Hopefully I didn't answer it too long-winded and I hopefully answered it thoroughly as possible for you guys.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Duggan's going to have the second question, but I am going to have to remind you, we only have about another 15 minutes and we have a number of questions to get through. So try to be cognizant of the remaining time. We'll see if we can make it through all the questions in the last 15 minutes, okay?
No problem.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. I'm Jim Duggan. I've been on the board since 1993, so 29 years. I just wrapped up a career of 37 years plus with the city of Beaverton. So I know very well the group that you are working with. I have a very simple question for you. The board desires that the selected candidate from this process will run in the upcoming May 2023 special election for a 2-year term. Do you intend to run for a 2-year term next spring?
Yep, the short answer is yes. I've called the election office, told them that I was interested in one of the positions, see how much the filing fee was because I was a little bit nervous if it was really absorbent, wasn't, and the signatures I needed. So I'm fully cognizant of what I need to do to run and fully willing to.
Thank you.
And I'm Commissioner Carl Fisher. I have served on the board since July. And before that, I spent 2 terms on the budget committee, one before COVID and one during COVID. So it was a very interesting experience to have those 2 different budget cycles. My background in public service goes back to my debate coaching days for local high schools, I currently work as the chief of staff in the Oregon legislature for a state representative in the Beaverton area. So I'm very well aware of all the folks in Beaverton too. It's a great little community. So my question for you is, as a board member, what would you do if you directly observed or learned of TVWD employees appearing unprofessional or representing the district poorly? For example, misconduct, tending to personal errands during the workday, stuff of that nature.
So, coming from law enforcement, we have one of the strictest and highest standards for upholding misconduct, both on and off the job. So, even though I'm off the clock right now, I'm never off the clock as far as responsibility goes. And I take that very seriously. So, if I see somebody doing something that is definitely misconduct or policy, it's my duty to not only the profession for public service, but the people to have to, inform the correct people of it. That being said, I also feel like it's my responsibility to also let that person know, like, hey, this is what you did. Ethically, I can't not keep quiet about that. So I have to tell somebody, because I think that at least that person deserves respect if they're knowing that it's coming from me. And I would hope that somebody did the same. So to make sure that somebody knows that if I'm going to turn them in for misconduct, that is something that's coming from me. I'm not doing something underhand, and I'm making sure I'm upfront about it with them. And yeah, hopefully that answered your question.
Yes. Great, thank you. I'm Todd Sanders, and I have been on the board for, I think, 3 or 4 years now. Prior to that, I was on the budget committee for 12 years. And I work at Portland Community College. My question for you, officer, is can you please describe your experience in meeting the needs of people with low incomes? How would your experience impact your votes in setting policy for the district, specific to water rates to preserve the district's infrastructure and to prepare for future water needs?
So, I mean, I come from a low income background family, so I get it that, it's coming up. We're going to be coming up on Christmas soon. That I've been in that position to where, we have bills to pay or we can buy gifts, but we can't have both. So I've been in that position. So I come from somewhere knowing that's a real life scenario for some people. But I also understand that infrastructure needs to be maintained in the city. And I've seen what happens when it's not maintained. So when somebody is telling me that my water rates are going up, the biggest thing I can do is going back to education. If I have the charts, the graph comparisons to other water rates in the area to show them, listen, this is how much you pay, this is how much the other people pay, and this is what's going to. If we don't maintain this and we kick the can down the road, then it's going to cost you a lot more money later down the road because we're not maintaining those pipes, we're not maintaining the things that we need to maintain. And I've seen it happen with Spokane roads where they could have paid a little extra every year to maintain the road. Instead, they let it go until it's so bad that you have to tear up the entire road and it's cost 10 times the price. So I know the consequences of not maintaining the infrastructure, and I'm fully willing to let the people know that these are the costs and this is what would happen if we don't do that.
Thank you. Commissioner Duggan?
The board of directors is a governing body responsible for setting policy for the district, and the chief executive officer or CEO who leads operations and manages the district's employees on a day-to-day basis. The CEO reports to the board and district employees report to the CEO. How do you plan to work effectively in this environment?
So I guess the first thing is I have to have confidence in the CEO, because you have to have confidence in your leader to be able to really work efficiently with them. So that's probably the best one. And I've seen really people micromanage other leaders. We're questioning every single thing they have at every question. So how I'd work with them is making sure I know what the policies are that he's supposed to be working with, and then asking very targeted questions and making sure they have that sort of relationship, that sort of confidence that he or she is comfortable like when I ask them a question that they're comfortable saying like, oh, actually, I don't know that answer, but they're like, I'm willing to find out, versus somebody just being a yes man and giving us everything like, yes, everything's fine when it's not. So having that confidence is first. So they know that if they confidently say, no, I don't know, that we're okay with that. And I think that's probably the biggest thing is having confidence. And then if after sitting, if I were to sit on the board for so many years, then I get a bigger feel for how the person works. And if the targeted question is just not answering the questions to really a good ability, to a competent ability, I believe as a leader, then that's where those things would be coming into question. But that would be something that would be later on down the road. But I'd always try to give confidence in who we have as the leader for that organization.
Thank you.
Commissioner, I'm sorry, Mr. McCullough, I can't spell, and we're being alphabetical, and I just, I apologize. So that's why the look on my face when you started talking is once again, I can't spell DOA versus DU.
Oh, no
Um,
problem.
Well, I didn't learn to read till I was in the 3rd grade, so I won't hold that against you. But, you know, there is kind of an alphabetical sequence. And we used to have 3 gyms. So, but now we're down to 2. But we're both, and I think, Carl, your middle name is James, isn't it?
That's correct. That's why when he said Jim Duggan, I just started chuckling to myself.
Okay. Well, anyway.
Well, and I was taught to respond when you're spoken to,
Yeah.
so I went with it.
Okay, I'm going to move on to question 6. The Board of Commissioners is a governing body responsible for setting policy for the district, and the CEO leads operations and manages the district employees.
Jim?
The CEO reports to the board, and district employees report to the CEO. How do you plan on working effectively in this environment?
Jim, will you ask him question number 5?
I asked the question that I've been asking all along.
We skipped
This
number
Jim.
5.
Yeah.
Jim, didn't you do number 5?
No, I was all keyed up
You
to
went
do the
off to
one that
6.
I went
Okay,
on to
well,
the
I'll go
regular
back
one
to
that I
number
could.
5. I probably should have learned my numbers besides just learning how to read.
Boy, we're a well-oiled machine tonight.
Okay, back to 5. Individual commissioners do not represent the district positions on issues publicly, e.g. with customers, public entities, or businesses, the media, etc. How do you plan to avoid misrepresenting the district position by distinguishing your personal views from the districts? Either that, or we can just change the order of alphabet in the English language.
So from my experience working with working with the public, if there's something I don't agree with that the organization is doing, that is something I'll have that we can hash it out behind closed doors, because we need to keep public confidence that we are working cohesively to keep that public confidence. So we look like we don't like anything. I completely disagree with that policy. If somebody were to ask me, like, you agree with all this, like, it's not necessarily if I'd agree with it or not. It's that this is what has come down and this is what we're going to work with. Knowing their thought process behind it, even if I didn't agree with it, I'm fully willing to educate the public on telling them what the thought process is for somebody doing that policy. And then if there are issues, to bring it through the leaders, but behind closed doors for a meeting. That's hopefully, usually I found out that meetings head out the top, being very professional and voicing your opinions on it gets you a lot more farther than just trying to make noise publicly.
Okay,
I've got the next question. Board members spend time attending board meetings, committee meetings, conferences, and time preparing for all of these meetings. Each month there's 1 2-hour board meeting, 1 2-hour work session, and there can be up to 6 hours of various different committee meetings. Board members typically attend the American Water Works Association regional and national conferences and the Special Districts Association of Oregon Conference. The expenses for these meetings and conferences are covered by TVWD. Are you able to devote sufficient time to prepare for and attend these meetings and conferences?
Short answer, yes. I know when the two work study ones, because right by my house, like I can make it there. I get off at 3 o'clock. If any ones land in between before I get off, as long as I have sufficient time to be able to take the time off, that's not an issue with my supervisor. He's fully fine with me taking an hour here of comp time. We have plenty of comp time, vacation time to play around with. As far as the attending the meeting for the the district association, I can make those no problem. As long as I'm given sufficient time and it's not a last minute meeting, then there should be no problem with scheduling.
Thank you. And just to follow up on that, our meetings and most of the meetings of the committees are in the evening. After 5 o'clock, they start at between 5 and 6 p.m. most of the time. And we typically have, a year's worth of meetings scheduled out in advance. So hopefully that wouldn't be a conflict with your personal schedule. The intent is not to be, since you're already volunteering.
Yes. That then if they're after 5 there should be almost no scheduling issue whatsoever.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Last question. Again, thank you for putting up with us this evening. And
Not a
this question
problem.
you already started answering. It's probably going to be right up your alley. Board members work with a variety of people, including fellow board members, employees, the public, and customers. Conflict can and does occur. Please share an example of time you successfully navigated conflict with another person.
So, I mean, there's too many for me to count in my career with the public sector to even kind of pinpoint one that sticks out. On a daily basis, I have to go out to the jail and pull people from the cells and bring them to a video courtroom to see the judge. I'm usually the go-to guy when there's the inmate that's so disrupted, doesn't want to come out of his cell, doesn't want to see the judge. If an officer goes there, can't get him out, I'm usually the one to go there and negotiate with them. Hey, listen, man, we're doing this for these reasons. I'm able to do that because I have a cool demeanor. I can be yelled at in my face and I can keep calm and I can bring somebody, like I said, back down to there. It's not an inherent skill. It's something that I've acquired over years of training to be able to get somebody from being irate to being calm and then listening to what I'm saying and then having a proactive conversation with them. So sorry if I didn't give one specific example because I mean it just happens so frequently.
Yeah, no, I recognize that that's probably something that's a natural skill set for you. Otherwise, you wouldn't be in the position you're in. So we're at about 30 minutes. We have a couple extra minutes built into our schedule to make sure if you want to ask any questions of us, which isn't required, but we wanted to make sure if you had any questions that you could ask them of us.
Yeah, I mean, you answered one of my first ones where the meeting's normally scheduled, which works out even perfectly. So, like I said, the other thing is, what is there any pay or compensation? And the only reason I'm asking is because if there is, I do have to let my chief of police know for a second employment. I've talked with my union president. He said if it's an unpaid position, there's no need to inform the police department of.
Okay. So I think to answer that, because of the complexities of with your other employment with a municipality, I'm going to ask our counselor, Clark Balfour, just to kind of give you the state overview of what this remuneration is all about, if Clark's available.
Okay.
I am.
Thank you, Clark.
I'm trying to get on camera so you don't just see some. Hi, good evening. The compensation that you obtain here is I guess what I would call a de minimis amount. It's set by statute. It is not considered lucrative in any way, if that makes a difference in your relationship with your employer. But the fact is that The legislature's provided that boards like this board, school boards, a whole range of public service type groups will pay a statutory fee of $50 per meeting, or when you attend on district business. If you attend a conference or do something like that, that's a per day compensation. You
Okay.
don't have to accept it, you don't have to apply for it, but it is there. So that's another thing for you to factor in. But it's not considered lucrative. I can't imagine that it would be violative of any of your
Oh,
policies at work. Is just, I guess, a disclosure issue for you. So
yeah. Yeah, and like I said, it's not. I'll probably, if I were to be given the position, I would let my chief of police know, just to be on the safe side. There shouldn't be any. Beaverton has their own water things. So there's no going to be conflict of interest there, and I'm fully aware that my chief of police will have no issues with me holding this position if I was granted it.
okay, good.
Thank you,
Um,
Clark.
You're welcome.
and well, I'm trying to think. So what's a typical year kind of like as far as the meetings go? Like typical meeting is what I usually like to know when I'm jumping into.
Well, we're spending 3 hours today, and making and getting $50 for that. Um, that's and I had another meeting this morning. Um, so we meet twice a month. We meet the first Tuesday of the month for approximately 2 hours, and then we meet on the third Wednesday of the month for approximately 2 hours. And then in between there, we have various committee meetings. We have finance committee, we have budget committee, we have the Willamette Water Supply Project Committee, the Joint Water Commission Committee, the Barney Reservoir Committee, that all take up time. But those secondary committees are typically once every 2, 3, or 4 months. Our board meetings are monthly. Those are the ones that take the majority of our time and usually take a little bit of research prior to attending. So that's it. Then, of course, as one of the questions pointed out, there are some conferences that people typically attend. The Special District Association of Oregon Conference, which happens in January of each year, somewhere here in the Oregon area. And then we have the American Water Works Association Conference. We have the Pacific Northwest section. This year it was in Tacoma. Before that, it was in Vancouver, and then it was in Spokane, and then the American Water Works National Conference, which is like usually in like Miami or somewhere in June. And this year there happens to be an American Water Works Infrastructure Conference right here in Portland next week that I know I'm attending, and I think some of the other board members will be attending as well. So those are available to you to attend, and those are most of our meetings.
Okay, no problem. And then one last question, if I have time for it. How often are do you guys deal with like the legislative changes that like govern around water? Is it quite extensive? Is there a lot of changes that occur yearly, or is it very rarely?
I'm going to see if Commissioner Doan wants to comment on that, or Commissioner Duggan. They both work in, they've worked in and work in municipal government, so they could probably tell you better than I can. So I'll step aside and see if either of them have a comment.
This is Jim Doan. It's been a long time since I had to register as a lobbyist. But we do give testimony from time to time on various issues. Uh, and it just happens, you can be, it's very easy to be the subject matter expert.
Okay,
And
perfect.
so, you can, it works out okay. One of the things I need to point out is that you don't have to apply for the funds. In other words, I generally don't. I contribute the money to the low-income people in the district, which keeps me clear of all the income tax issues.
Yeah.
But I have never had anybody question my motives when I'm lobbying for a particular position concerning water or water rights or dam safety or something like that. Nobody's ever called me on it. So maybe I should be more careful, but it's been pretty open-ended, and the state seems to respect the position of board members.
This is Jim Duggan. I concur. I think just being open with who the audience is that you're talking with, and letting them know that even though you may wear multiple hats, you are expressing your expertise or opinion on the matter, wearing a particular hat that you are given at any given time. I made it real clear that some of my day-to-day work assignments, working for the Public Works Department or the Community Development Department for the city of Beaverton, had nothing to do with my TVWD responsibilities, and I would bend over backwards to make sure that those were both separate, and that there was no misinterpreting of what I was talking about at any given time as to whether there was a ulterior motive, so to speak. So that was the best way. And I, like Commissioner Dillon mentioned, I'd never been called on it, and I received the confidence of the people I was reporting to at the city of Beaverton over the years, that made sure that I wasn't the source of unnecessary conflict when I was working for the city of Beaverton or as a commissioner for the water district. I feel very fortunate in that regard.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. It's a lot of good information.
Alrighty. We are at the end of our time. I'm going to have to sign us off here. Just to let you know our next steps. We were very surprised to have so many wonderful applicants for this position. You are one of several. And again, first of all, thank you for that willingness to be considered. We don't have, we're not done with our interviews yet. Our initial plan was to inform someone by our September 15th meeting. We may or may not make that. We'll have a better feel for that at the end of our 3-hour day today. But we will certainly have someone in place by our October 15th meeting for certain. So that's the best I can offer you right now. All I can say is if you have any questions or you need anything clarified, please feel free to get a hold of Debbie. She's the person that's been communicating with you, and she can pass that question on to ourselves or to anybody in the district that could best answer the question. But again, thank you again for your time, Officer McCullough. Very grateful for you for considering this position of public service, and we really wish you a great day and a great evening.
Thank you. It was an honor even just being here to interview for it. So hopefully I hear from you guys soon.
All right. Yes. Thank you very much. Have a nice night.
Thank you. You as well. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
This is Rob.
Hi, Rob. You're connected to the Board of Commissioners. I'll let Commissioner Sanders take it away.
Hello.
Todd, you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's a great commercial. Mr. Master, this is Todd Sanders. Now that I've unmuted myself, can you hear us okay?
I can. Hi, Todd.
Hi, how are you?
Sorry about the, been trying to get online here and it just keeps circling connecting, but not connecting.
Well, that's okay. Digital technical gremlins are out there, and I think we can do this just fine over the phone. We have 8 questions, which I do believe you have a copy of, that we're going to go over this next 30 minutes. We don't have a lot of time, so we're going to want to get started right away. But before we do, I just wanted to express our gratitude as a board for for you applying for this position and considering donating your time, being a volunteer to serve on the Tualatin Valley Water District's Board of Commissioners. As you know, it's not a highly remunerated, it's actually, a few pennies a day kind of job. And it's not a job, it's a hobby. Commissioner Duggan likes to call this a hobby, which I think is a very adequate explanation. And so we're very grateful that you would consider serving on the board with us.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
All righty. I'm going to have each of the board members go in alphabetical order, only because I can't spell and I keep screwing this up. So I'm going to leave this to the board to do. And
right.
they're going to ask questions in an alphabetical order. And when they do, they'll also introduce themselves. Okay?
Okay, great.
Okay, I am Jim Doan, and I've
Hi,
been on the
Jim.
board since 1998. Prior to that, I was the chief engineer of the Portland Water Bureau.
Right.
Am I getting through?
Yes, I can hear you, Jim.
Okay, thank you.
And
It's hard to tell really what's going on. So anyway, I
Yeah,
do
I
want
know.
to say that I'm hard of hearing. So if you ask a question, it may take a while for the captions to catch up with. Usually I can lip read, but since I don't have a video of you, that's kind of out of the question. So
Right.
anyway, let me ask
Well,
my
Jim,
question.
oh, sure.
What skills, connections, resources, and expertise do you have to offer TVWD as a board member?
Well, Jim, just a little background, and we've actually met from time to time in the past. I was with the city of Hillsborough from 1990 to 2008 as the assistant city manager. And at 2008, I went to Washington County and was their assistant county administrator till 2019. So I worked in the public sector under cities and counties and worked with TVWD fairly closely in the past in that environment. So I think that gives me a lot of background experience in terms of the public sector and understanding the role of a policy board versus management and administration. I understand that very clearly and have been around that for a long time. At the city of Hillsborough for those many years, I represented the city on the JWC, the Joint Water Commission, worked closely with the Joint Water Commission for many, many years. We went through several projects. We expanded the treatment plant, as you may remember, because you've been around this for a long time, at least twice, if I remember correctly. We raised the Barney from, I believe, 4,000 acre feet to 20,000 acre feet. I was part of that process. We built the North Side transmission line during that time. I worked on that, and several contract upgrades, updates with the members of the JWC. So I've been around that for a long time and do have quite a bit of experience and background there. In terms of connections, I still have maintained connections with clearly the city of Hillsborough. As some of you may know, my wife is the director of finance for the city of Hillsborough, and that keeps me fairly close to what's going on there. I know this city manager fairly well and see him occasionally. Other members of the JWC, I've worked with Forest Grove, in fact, working with them now on a project as a consultant. So I've maintained quite a few of those connections, not as much with the city of Beaverton since we've had some changes there, but still have some connections at the city of Beaverton. In terms of the question regarding resources, I'm not quite sure I understand the resource question, other than I do maintain a home office. I do some consulting out of here, so I do have, a home office and everything that entails and requirements. Anyway, hopefully that gets to your question.
Jim?
Uh, Hi, this is Commissioner Jim Duggan. I served on the Joint Water Commission, in the aughts years, as we call them, and I remember you being the City of Hillsborough Finance Director and presenting the Joint Water Commission budget as the City of Hillsborough was the managing agency then and now. So I think I might have been the Jim Duggan or the Jim D that was a engineer that you recall. In any event, I just
yes,
wrapped up. Oh, go ahead.
Sure. No, Jim, sure, we've met several times, and I think I've actually met Jim Doan too. But yes, we go way back to those days.
Wouldn't surprise me at all. I just wrapped up my career, 37 years plus with the city of Beaverton as a civil engineer, and I've been on the board for 29 years now, since 1993. I have a real simple question for you.
Sure.
The board desires the selected candidate from this process to run in the upcoming May 2023 special election for a 2-year term. Do you intend to run in the special districts election next spring?
Well, the answer to that is generally yes. The only caveat that I would put to that is if for some reason I felt that I really just wasn't adding any value to the board, and I don't think that's a likely situation, but if I really felt that just was not adding value, I may think long and hard about that. But outside of that, generally yes.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Commissioner Carl Fisher. A little bit
Carl.
about me. I've been on the board since July, and I served 2 terms on the budget committee, one before COVID and one after. So I got to see, operationally and budgetary the changes from COVID. I work in the Oregon legislature as a chief of staff for a state representative that represents Beaverton and unincorporated Washington County. And my question for you is, as a board member, what would you do if you directly observed or learned of a district employee appearing unprofessional or representing the district poorly? For example, some form of misconduct or tending to personal errands during the workday, those sort of situations.
Okay, thank you for the question. I would say it depends on the circumstances. In my mind, if I casually observed what I believe was unprofessional behavior by an employee, I think I would simply mention that to the CEO and let him do with that information what he deems necessary or appropriate. And that would be the extent of it. If I believe I observed some very egregious behavior by an employee, I think I would talk with the rest of the board and recommend that the board ask the CEO to investigate if that were very egregious. And in the case if the egregious behavior were to involve the CEO, then I would recommend, talk with the board and recommend that the board hire, a third-party investigator independent investigator to investigate the situation and report directly to the board. But that would be the only case if it were something egregious that involved the CEO. Outside of that, it's management's job to follow up on that.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. This is Todd Sanders, and I am currently the board chair and the poster child for what happens when you grow up in the autocorrect era of Microsoft. Where spelling seems to not be my forte tonight. That being said, I also chair the JWC board right now as well, with as Nikki would tell you. My question for you is, can you describe your experience in meeting the needs of people with low incomes? How would your experience impact your votes in setting policy for the district specific to increasing water rates to preserve the district's infrastructure and prepare for future water needs?
Okay, well, thank you for the question, Todd. At the county, one of the many departments I had was the housing authority. I oversaw the housing authority at Washington County, which is in the business of meeting the housing needs of our low-income population. And I work closely with them to help try to provide housing and related services to that segment of the population. So do have, I think, a fair amount of experience working with that segment of the population and trying to meet those needs. At the city, we prior to that, we were constantly trying to balance the needs of the low-income population and what we were struggling with, water shutoffs, which I would imagine you're struggling with as well. And that was always a balancing to try to be sensitive to the needs of those that were not able to meet the water rates at the time and avoid shutoffs. We would work with them. We had our own funding there to help in some cases. In some cases, we would try to work with Washington County Community Action, which does help in some cases with utility costs. And so, I've been involved in that situation a fair amount of time and worked to try to meet the needs of that segment of the population. As the question relates to infrastructure, I feel pretty strongly about this. As far as water infrastructure or any real, necessary infrastructure, expensive infrastructure that is necessary to meet the broader community, I believe it is not appropriate that a small segment of our population can drive the decisions regarding investment in infrastructure when projects are really needed. I think there are creative ways to work around that, but if we need to provide some significant increases in infrastructure to meet the needs in the future of our broader community, it can't be held hostage by a small group. Now, I guess I would give the example that I was involved with. I was for many years was on the CEO board of WACA. WACA is our 911 center. We had roughly 17 members. It's a cooperative, if you're familiar with how it operates. And so all 17 members had an equal vote. We were facing some very significant, this was many years ago, a very significant need for infrastructure improvements to improve the 911 system. Yet we weren't able to move forward because roughly half the votes were no, because of the very small agencies just simply could not afford that. So I took the initiative at that point in time to recommend the CEO board and sit down with the smaller agencies. And what we did was talk with each one of the agencies. Roughly half of those made up less than 5% of the population and 5% of the revenues that supported WAC. And so after talking with them, we agreed that we would reduce that half of those members to one vote, and in exchange for that one vote, that they would for several years see no more than a 3% increase in their WACA fees to provide WACA service to their jurisdiction. That was successful. We were able to then move forward with enough yes votes to move forward with what was expensive infrastructure that's necessary to meet the needs today of the WACA system. But I think that's just an example of there are creative solutions to this, but you can't be held hostage moving forward with critical infrastructure and especially expensive infrastructure of utilities like this.
Thank you. According to my spelling, Commissioner Doan is next.
Yes. Thank you. Individual commissioners do not represent the district position on issues publicly, i.e. customers, public entities, businesses, the media, etc. How do you plan to avoid misrepresenting the district position by distinguishing your personal views from the district's?
Thank you, Commissioner, for the question. I agree that as a board member that it's not my position to be out there, particularly in the media, representing representing the board position. I would not necessarily disagree, but I think there are times when you're out in the public, you're going to be interfacing with, customers, people that have questions. And I think in that case, I would simply communicate to them the board's position if there's a policy position on any particular issue. I wouldn't seek that out publicly. I wouldn't seek that out certainly through the media. That's not my position. But, in casual conversations when you're out at the grocery store or whatever, I think that would communicate at least the board's position on a policy matter should the question come up. In terms of my personal, I do have a right to my personal opinion. Clearly, if I were to communicate that to a friend, acquaintance out there that is in disagreement with the board's position, I have to be very clear that I'm not representing the board. This is only my personal opinion about a particular issue, but I would certainly try to avoid that. But there's going to be occasion. I'm sure you all are have come up with that, against that, where occasionally someone has a differing opinion, and they have a right to that. But it's not a board member's position to, in a public forum, state their own personal opinion in opposition to the board's position, in my opinion.
Hey, this is Commissioner Jim Duggan again. My second question is, the Board of Directors is a governing body responsible for setting policy for the district, and the Chief Executive Officer or CEO leads operations and manages the district's employees on a day-to-day basis. The CEO reports to the board and district employees report to the CEO. How do you plan to work effectively in this environment?
Well, thanks for the question, Commissioner. This is exactly the environment I've worked in for 28 years at the city and the county. I'm very, very checked out and clear on the role of the board as a policy board and the role of the CEO and administration as administering policy. And really, those should never cross. And so I am very clear about the role of the board being a policy role only, and not involved with administration or management. I think only in a few, very, very few situations would that be different. And they are extremely rare, but for the most part, it really is the role of the board to be at the policy level and not crossing over into management or administration. And as I say, I have quite a bit of experience in that area, and very clear on that.
Thank you.
This is Commissioner Fisher with my second question.
Commissioner?
Board members spend time attending various board meetings, committee meetings, conferences, as well as time preparing for all those meetings. Each month, the board meets for 1 2-hour board meeting, 1 2-hour work session, and approximately there are various committees that could meet up to 6 hours a month. Board members typically attend the American Water Works Association regional and national conferences and the Special District Association conference here in Oregon. Expenses for attendance at these conferences is covered by the district. Are you able to devote sufficient time to prepare for and attend these meetings and conferences?
Well, this would be a quick answer. Sure. That's no problem.
Wonderful.
You love concise. This is Todd Sanders with the 8th and final question for you this evening. Board members work with a variety of people, including fellow board members, TVWD employees, the public, and customers. Conflicts do arise. Can you give us an example of a time you successfully navigated conflict with another person?
Well, I guess I could say, having spent 28 years in city and county administration, that was pretty much a daily occurrence. So I do have some experience in the area. I suppose if we were talking about an example that would resonate with your board, I would imagine you're wrestling with this, is rate and tax increases. And I've been through many of those through the years, including property tax. I was involved with some of the structuring of Measure 50 property tax measure and all the fighting around that. I've been through and actually structured several local option taxes with the city and the county. We had many water rates, sewer rates, swim rate increases, all of which generated a lot of consternation and angry citizens and folks, which I'm sure have experienced. And so, yes, there's been a lot of situations. I'm trying to think of almost, exactly one, but my approach to that generally is everyone has a very valid position in terms of how it's affecting them. And I think it's important for me to try to understand as clearly as I can their position and where they're coming from and how it's affecting them. That doesn't necessarily mean that it would affect an outcome or a change in an outcome, I should say, but to truly try to empathize and understand where they're coming from, because there's always different positions. And in many cases, there can be some creative solutions to those situations. In some cases, it just simply is a tough battle. And I think you just simply have to listen to their position and try to explain why the board's position in terms of policy may differ from that, and why it's better for the broader community that we're serving to move in that direction. I know I'm not giving a very specific example, but it's just so many. I mean, that seems like it's happened almost every day.
I understand that as in your role, dealing with conflict was really part of your day-to-day job description. So it's
Yeah,
probably
it's
difficult to
pretty.
pull out one particular case.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, I would imagine. I haven't been real close to where your board has been recently, but I have heard some rate increases, and that always can bring them out of the woodwork, and for good reason. There are folks that just simply it hits much harder than others, and it's just it's our role to understand that and understand where they're coming from, and try to take it into consideration to the extent possible, but keeping an eye on what is appropriate for the broader community.
Great, thank you. Well, that does it for our questions. Let me tell you what our next steps are, and that is that again, first let me say thank you again for volunteering to meet with us today and for volunteering to be considered to be a board member with the Tualatin Valley Water District. Your service to the community is deeply appreciated, and it's not lost on us. The effort that it takes to be part of this board. So thank you. Our next steps, we were absolutely astounded by the number of people that applied for this position, and we are interviewing right now. We don't quite know when we'll have a decision. We'll have a discussion this evening at the end of our interviews. We were hoping to perhaps have someone in place by our September 15th board meeting. That may or may not happen. We can't commit to it, but we are pretty sure, we're absolutely sure that we will have somebody in place by our October 15th meeting. If you have any questions, you can forward them on to Debbie, who's been communicating with you. And
Right.
she can pass them on to us or to anybody in the district that can best answer those questions.
All right. Well, thank you. And actually, I wanted to thank all of you and your board for your service to the community. I know that's difficult and it can be a heavy lift at sometimes. And so, I think it's important that, I thank you for your service, because it can sometimes feel like a thankless job, I'm sure. Anyway, thank you very much. And I think that's fantastic. You've had that much interest in the board. That's great. It's good to hear.
We were certainly taken back by it. And yeah, I concur. I share your opinion. It is fantastic. And we have a number of excellent applicants, including yourself, who this is going to be a very difficult decision-making process for us. So you've not made it any easier.
Yeah, it'll be difficult for you, but that's great. I'm really glad to hear there are a lot of folks and that would serve well in that position, willing to step up, and that's a great indication for the future, because there's been years when we struggled to try to get an interest in serving.
Yep, that is true. All righty, we'll let you get on with your evening. Thank you once again, Mr. Masser, Robert, for your time and for your consideration for the board. Have a great evening.
You too. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Is it Parmentier?
It's pronounced Parmentier. Congratulations. Got it
Parmentier,
on the first try.
Right. I teach for a living, so I can sometimes guess well. Mr. Parmentier, my name is Todd Sanders. Thank you for joining us this evening. And thank you for considering joining the Tualatin Valley Tualatin Valley Water District Board of Commissioners. We want to recognize the fact that you've considered volunteering for this position, knowing that it's not a career job. It's, as Commissioner Duggan will say, a hobby. And I think it's a very apt description. So I want to begin by saying thank you.
Absolutely. And thank you for the consideration as well.
Wonderful. In lieu of the fact that we only have about 30 minutes, I want to get started. We're going to go alphabetically, and as each commissioner asks you a question, they will introduce themselves and give you a little background about them, if that's okay.
Absolutely perfect.
And we'll try to get through this quick enough so that if you have any questions at the end, which again aren't required, but if you have any questions, we'll have some time to answer any of those if you have any. Okay.
Will do.
All right. Thank you. Commissioner Doan will go first. D.O.
Okay, I'm Jim Doan, and I've been on the water board since 1998. Prior to that, I was the chief engineer of the Portland Water Bureau. And I really have enjoyed my 20-some years with TVWD. The question I have, we've got, I don't know if you've seen the question. We've got a total of 8 questions. Each of us get to ask 2.
Okay.
Okay, I will add that I'm hard of hearing, so I'm depending upon captions. And the captions tend to lag the actual speech by, 4 or 5 seconds. So if you say something and it doesn't look like I'm reacting, I'm waiting for the captions to catch up.
Understood.
Okay. What skills, connections, resources, and expertise do you have to offer TVWD as a board member?
Well, I have been involved in audit compliance and risk and cybersecurity for the past 30 years. I am currently a certified internal auditor. Companies I've worked for have ranged in size anywhere from Fortune 100s as well as state and local governments. I've worked for 2 electric utilities in the enterprise risk management space as well as internal audit. I'm currently the chief audit executive at one of the 2 electric utilities based here in Portland. The company serves over 2 million customers. Our territory spans 6 states, and we own the power plants and transmission lines and are the largest grid operator here in the Western US. Also, I ran for Shoreview, Minnesota City Council many years ago, about 25 years ago. Did not win, but I ended up serving on 2 city commissions. One was planning and one was Parks and Rec. The city actually owned and operated an indoor water park. So that was quite the eye opener as far as liability. And really, this is my chance to give back. And that's the way I'm treating it. Again, I've always wanted to, relative newcomer to the area. I've been in the Portland area now for about 1.5 years, but things have settled, the dust has settled a little bit. So this is my opportunity to actually give back to the community.
All right, thank you. This is Commissioner Jim Duggan. I have the second question. It's fairly simple. I've been a board member for 29 years and just retired from the city of Beaverton as a civil engineer. But again, the question I have for you is very simple and direct today. The board desires a selected candidate of those that we're interviewing tonight. We hope that new board member will run in the upcoming May 2023 special election for a full 2-year term. It's not a 4-year term. In this case, it would be just a 2-year term. Do you intend to do so next spring?
If I am nominated for the open board position, I definitely look forward to continuing to serve the district, and I do plan to run again in next May.
Excellent, thank you.
Of course, thank you.
I'm Commissioner Carl Fisher, and I've served on the board since July of this year. And I also served 2 terms on the district's budget committee, one before COVID and one during COVID. So it was quite an interesting experience to see how the budgets and the processes that local governments had to go through to adapt for COVID times, and online virtual stuff is one of the things that we've adapted with. I work in the Oregon legislature as chief of staff to a state representative in the city of Beaverton and unincorporated Washington counties. So I see a good share of the district in my day job. My question for you is, as a board member, what would you do if you directly observed or learned of a district employee appearing unprofessional or representing the district poorly? For example, a form of misconduct or tending to personal errands during the workday, things of that nature.
It's a personnel issue that should be handled by the district itself. That would be district management and human resources, and not by a member of the commission. What if I was observing it, what I would do is detail the specifics of that incident and report it back to the district itself, either through the regular channels or through a fraud hotline if one exists. If any activity or if any activity resulted from the district as because of the incident, the outcomes should follow published disciplinary guidelines. We had an incident at my day job back in 2019 in Lincoln City, where 5 employees were actually caught using their work trucks to perform repairs on personal rental properties. They were falsifying time cards. Friends were calling in fake power outages, and they were turning off transformers in the middle of the night. Good stuff. And all of that was in an attempt to accrue additional overtime. And the reason I bring that up is because this was specifically handled by our internal audit team and our legal team. So again, it was handled in-house. And I guess that's what I wanted to convey, is that really this is an internal matter at that point.
Boy, people will never stop surprising you, will they?
It's the beauty of working in audit. We have the best stories. Maybe you guys do too, but I understand.
Wow, that's interesting. All right, so I'm Todd Sanders. I was on the budget committee for 12 years before joining the board. I'm a slow learner, so it took me 12 years to understand budgets. I still don't completely understand budgets, but I've been on the board now for, I believe my second election is coming up this spring. My question for you is, can you please describe your experience in meeting the needs of people with low incomes? How would your experience impact your votes in setting policy for the district, specific to increasing water rates to preserve the district's infrastructure and prepare for future water needs?
And this is where I'm a little bit lacking, but what I do feel is that we're all stewards for our customers in the community. So I know there are some low-income programs that are out there. I don't know if they're necessarily income-based, but that might be another tact. And I know we also, as a district, distribute water-saving devices, leak kits, low-flow shower heads, aerators, things like that. And I'd be curious to see how those are actually being communicated to the public. Who is the demographic we're actually seeing take these things or use these items? Again, not really knowing, again, just in an attempt to obviously save water. The district definitely needs to continue its work in planning for future growth and also perform upgrades on our existing infrastructure, which would include seismic retrofits. We really do need to make sure that we've exhausted all federal, state, and local sources of revenue and grants before we do consider rate increases. And here's where the auditor comes out, performing due diligence on proposed rate increases. So that could be performing an analysis on the project itself. And again, thinking outside the box at different ways of getting those efficiencies out there. And I'm not trying to do a plug here, I promise. One thing that my current company does, and I didn't know this until a week ago, And I don't know if you can see it, but this is actually a reusable envelope. So what this is the bill goes out, the customer turns around, cuts off the bottom, and returns the same envelope. So again, you're not having the expense of that second envelope going out with the bills. So, it's just these little incremental things that will, it's not going to offset the major rate increases. I know that, but there are other ways to save money along the way that hopefully can be passed along to the customers.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, this is Jim Doan again. And here's my question. Individual commissioners do not represent the district's position on issues publicly, i.e. with customers, public entities, businesses, the meetings, etc. How do you plan to avoid misrepresenting the district position by distinguishing your personal views from the district's?
Discretion. And really, it's no different from my current job. Most of the work that I perform at my day job is covered by a non-disclosure agreement. So that could be anything ranging from upcoming projects the company has in the pipeline to potential litigation. Any comment and any comments that are made are followed by, all opinions are my own and don't necessarily represent that of my employer, which I feel would be the same thing operating in the commissioner capacity. Going back to my city council run back in 1996, it was the infancy of the internet, but we were told even back then that you're keeping a pristine online presence because information lasts forever. So again, never saying things that could potentially get leaked in the media, things like that would reflect badly. So again, it goes back to discretion.
Hey, this is Jim Duggan again. My second question is, the Board of Directors is a governing body responsible for setting policy for the district, and the Chief Executive Officer, CEO, leads in operations and manages the district's employees on a day-to-day basis. The CEO reports to the board, and the district employees report to the CEO. How do you plan to work effectively in this environment?
And again, going back to the day job, I believe in a really strong relationship with management. Our respective roles and responsibilities are really clear, and it's the same in any work environment. You're maintaining that open and honest line of communication, and it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to agree on everything, but you're being respectful and you're still listening to all points of view. We're all tasked with doing what's right for the customers and also the community.
Thank you.
Of course.
This is Commissioner Fisher again. I have the next question. Board members spend time attending board meetings, committee meetings, and conferences, as well as time preparing for these meetings. Each month, the board meets for 1 2-hour board meeting, 1 2-hour work session, and there could potentially be up to 6 hours in various different committee meetings. Board members typically attend the American Water Works Association regional and national conferences and the Special Districts Association of Oregon conference. Expenses for attendance at these conferences is covered by the district. Are you able to devote sufficient time to prepare for and attend these meetings and conferences?
My understanding is that the meetings are typically held after work hours or in the late afternoons. So definitely no issue attending and even preparing for those meetings. Conferences, again, sufficient notice, there's definitely no issue attending those as well. And my one agreement that I have with my day job's legal department is that any stipend that is provided for attending meetings and things like that would be returned. So again, it needs to be an unpaid role. That they were very clear on that, and it also needed to not be in our service territory, and it isn't. So again, I don't see that as an issue at all.
So just to follow up, you are allowed to decline the, it's almost really an honorarium. It's $50 a day maximum for a meeting. So whether the meeting is 1 hour or 8 hours in a day, it's $50 maximum. Commissioner Doan, in particular, is an example of someone who donates that money back to our customer assistance fund.
Which would be my intent as well. Again, they did make it very clear that it needs to remain an unpaid role.
Mm-hmm. And maybe Clark can verify this. Clark's our legal counsel.
Sure.
That this is how the state views these things.
Perfect.
My camera is not turning on for some reason, but hopefully you can hear me. Yeah, okay. That's right. It's a statutory fee, essentially. It's considered de minimis. It's non-lucrative. But what you choose to do with it, you don't even have to apply it or claim it. And then if you do claim it, you could divert it along the lines of what Commissioner Doan does. So I think it's just really, it's a matter of individual choice, but I don't think it's going to be something that anyone would ever say can act as an improper influence or otherwise, be something that is untoward.
Sure. Understood. And I was going to say Commissioner Doan has the right idea. So I would definitely follow in his footsteps.
We find Commissioner Doan is usually right.
Noted.
Okay. I have the last question this evening, and that is, board members work with a variety of people, including fellow board members, TVWD employees, the public, and customers. Conflict can and does occur. Can you please share an example of a time you successfully navigated conflict with another person?
Did I mention I'm an auditor?
I was going to say, you probably have a whole bag full of examples.
So to say that I deliver results that may adversely, impact a person or a group on a regular basis, that's my job. That's what I do. So again, it's a matter of how you deliver those results. The day job, again, what we'll do is that we will address the issues as they arise. We'll discuss, make sure that we have the same understanding, that we're not off on a tangent. Maybe we just are not seeing, the information. We're not interpreting it correctly, and we definitely don't do gotcha audits. Just for some background, always being respectful of the person who is delivering the message. We may not agree on everything. We probably won't agree on everything. But you do have to hear people out and listen to their point of view, but also with the caveat that if the exchange becomes personal or abusive, you cut it off. So again, happy to hear opposing points of view, happy to discuss in a professional manner, but if it gets down to something less than professional, I think the correct thing would be to cut off the conversation.
Understand. Thank you. Well, Mr. Parmentier, that's our last question. Do you have any questions for us? And again, they're not necessary, but if you did, I wanted to give you an opportunity to ask.
I don't, and because I'm thinking that I am probably the only thing standing between you and enjoying the rest of your evening. I don't want to be
No,
respectful of that.
Please, no, it's okay. We've set aside time to make sure that we've met with you appropriately. So do not feel rushed in any way.
No. And I don't. And again, I really, really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me. And as I said, if I'm successful, I look forward to joining you on the board. And if not, I will look forward to serving, hopefully in some other capacity. Really appreciate it.
Well, again, let me first express the board's gratitude for you considering this position within the community. It's a community service hobby, and we want to acknowledge your willingness to serve your community. So thank you very much from all the board members. We are very grateful. Next steps, if you do have any questions, you've been communicating with Debbie, and you can send questions to her. She will pass them on to the board or whomever within the district can best answer your questions. As far as the process from here, we don't quite know how we're going to close this out. That's going to be our next discussion. We've had a number of applicants and we've done a number of interviews, which, as everybody has said, this is both a good thing and a very difficult thing because, like yourself, you're an outstanding candidate. And we would love to have you on the board, but we can only take one person.
Right.
So we have to figure out how we're going to do that or how we're going to finalize that process. Initially, we hoped to be nominating someone for the September 15th meeting. I can't guarantee that's the case, but I can pretty much bet my dollar that we will have somebody in place by October 15th.
Perfect.
So those are our next steps, and that's where we're heading. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Debbie, and we will answer them as quickly as we can.
I will definitely do that. Again, thank you very, very much, and thanks for your service. And I hope you have all have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Mr. Permatier. Have a nice night. Bye-bye.
Take care now. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Woo! We made it. We survived. My dog's here like, you're done, right? You're not quite done, Bubba. All right, so we've got a few minutes before 8. Can I ask a simple question? Does someone have a favorite right off the top? Like if they had their choice, there would be one person that they would choose over everybody else that, we would be done with this in 7 minutes. Does that person exist?
I'll go by saying no.
Okay.
I don't have one that stands out to me. I gotta process what happened this evening. Individually, they all are great candidates. I don't think I did not hear one thing that would lead me to disqualify any one of these people from further consideration right off the top of the head.
Wonderful. What about you, Commissioner Fisher? I see your microphone's off, so any thoughts?
I think out of the folks, this long list of people we've interviewed these 2 evenings, I mean, I could definitely get to a top 4 of some kind, but definitely I wouldn't have a top one yet.
Good. Commissioner Doan, how do you feel?
I don't see anybody that's completely disqualified. I think there's some that I would like to serve with better than others. And there's 2 in particular that I thought were outstanding, but that doesn't mean that there aren't 4 that were outstanding.
Okay.
I want to think about it for a while, but we've got good candidates. And I
We
don't
do.
think there's anybody who would be disqualified. It's unfortunate that we had the video problem tonight, but yeah. So do you want us to send you a list like in numerical order?
Well, I think we're going to have to ask both Clark and Debbie on our next steps, because if we meet together, we have to be a meeting, and I need Clark's input as to if we can send lists amongst each other of our top choices, and if we did that, what we would do with those lists.
So those lists would be notes, but I think the best thing would be for one of you, and I'm thinking it's you, Commissioner Sanders, would be the gathering place to have folks rate their preferences and see and send them to you only, not to share. And then you could create a ranking, because there may be a lot of coalition around 2 or 3 people. And then at that point, I think you could then meet to have a discussion about kind of how the rankings came out, and then where do you go from there? And people could be free to advocate for or against people or whatever. So I would at least start there, and then you may need to have a special meeting to do that. I don't think we can do that part of the meeting in executive session. I'm sorry to say.
Okay.
But so we'll have to figure out another way to have a session like this, and we'll just give that some thought. But I think in the meantime, why don't you collect the rankings from folks? And my suggestion would be that that all commissioners just say, person A number 1, person B number 2, person 3 number C, or tied or something, but try to put some kind of ranking on it, so that then you, Commissioner Sanders, can start ordering them, and to see if you're starting to get to a consensus on who it is.
Understood. So with that, could everybody rank their top 4 applicants and have them to me by Friday? Today's already Tuesday night. Tomorrow's already Wednesday. Short week. If you could email me your top 4 applicants, then I will review those and see if we coalesce around a particular individual or a couple of individuals, and how we proceed from there in terms of allowing each of you to advocate, or each of us to advocate for any particular individual and move forward on a final meeting. And again, I don't think we need to be done by September 15th.
Do you want our notes?
I think Debbie's going to ultimately want the notes.
Yeah, I was going to send an email
Okay.
out tomorrow and request the notes.
For me, just a ranking, and then keep a copy of your notes, so that if we gather together and we say maybe 2 of us have a person ranked number 1, and the other 2 people have that person ranked number 2, we can determine some way of finalizing an order and making a choice. How's that sound?
Works for me.
Okay. Real good then.
So
With
you
that,
want
then,
that by Friday AM, or by the end of this coming weekend, or
how about by end of workday Friday? Can we make end of workday Friday?
I will attempt to do that. Yes.
Okay.
I think I can. I'm pretty sure I can.
That'll give me all day Saturday to play with. No, I'm just kidding. All righty. So end of the day, Friday, if you can possibly do that.
Okay.
All right. Great. Thank you, everybody. We made 8 o'clock.
Yay.
Have a nice evening. Thank you for your time.